Vince Herbert, president of the Space Research and Development Center, lived a life most could only dream about. The center he led was dedicated to exploring the mysteries of space and developing advanced technology to foster intergalactic communication. Over the years, Vince had gained a reputation as a bold leader, known not only for his contributions to science, but for his close relationships with various extraterrestrial species. There was even a small alien creature he'd secretly adopted, a lively little pet that no one else on Earth knew about. His connection with aliens was so strong that they shared details about their own worlds and lives, trusting him as one of their own. Yet, despite his many professional achievements, Vince often felt a void in his personal life. That all changed during a routine trip to a nearby star system. On this particular visit, Vince was greeted by an alien woman named Foxera. Unlike the other extraterrestrials he had met, Foxera had a captivating charm, and the beauty that radiated from her was mesmerizing. Her eyes glimmered with a curiosity and intelligence that matched Vince's own, and her aura was magnetic, drawing him in with every word she spoke. She welcomed him warmly, offering him a tour of her home planet. Vince could tell that this was no ordinary encounter. There was a spark between them, a sense of something unspoken yet powerful. As they parted ways, Vince couldn't help but smile. "Thank you for the hospitality, Foxera. If you ever wish to visit Earth, know that you're always welcome." Foxera's face lit up, and she replied, "I would love to see your world one day, perhaps sooner than you think." Back on Earth, Vince resumed his daily life, but he couldn't shake the thought of Foxera. That night, after settling down at home, he found his small alien pet causing a delightful bit of chaos in the house. Vince laughed as he watched the creature dart around with boundless energy, jumping onto tables and knocking over trinkets. As soon as the creature saw him, though, it calmed down, nestling into his arms with a soft, contented hum. This little alien, though mischievous, was the closest companion Vince had in his earthly home. After tidying up the mess, he finally drifted off to sleep, his thoughts lingering on Foxera's mesmerizing gaze. In the dead of night, Vince's phone rang, jolting him awake. Grudgingly, he answered, barely processing the sound of Foxera's voice on the other end. "Vince," she said, her voice soft but steady. Suddenly, he was fully awake, his heart racing. "Foxera, it's so good to hear from you." He stammered, trying to gather his thoughts. She smiled. He could hear it in her tone. "If your offer still stands, I would love to visit Earth. Tomorrow night, perhaps?" Vince's heart soared. "Yes, of course. I'll send you the address right away." He gave her his home address, the anticipation buzzing through him as he lay back down, unable to sleep. The next day, Vince could think of nothing but her arrival. He took a day off work to prepare, meticulously cleaning every corner of his house and even giving his small alien pet a talk about being on its best behavior. When evening arrived, Vince felt a nervous excitement he hadn't felt in years. Just as he finished arranging the last of the snacks and refreshments, there was a gentle knock at the door. He opened it to find Foxera standing there, her presence more radiant than he'd remembered. She stepped into his home, and they shared a warm smile, their eyes lingering on each other in silent acknowledgement of the connection that had begun to bloom between them. Settling into the living room, they began talking about everything: life, the wonders of space, and the peculiarities of Earth. Foxera was fascinated by the concept of Earth's seasons and human traditions, while Vince listened intently as she described her home planet and its breathtaking landscapes. The conversation flowed effortlessly, each word deepening the bond that had formed between them. Suddenly, a soft noise interrupted their conversation. Foxera looked up, curiosity flashing in her eyes. Vince knew instantly it was his small alien pet, awake and curious about the visitor. Without a second thought, Foxera rose and followed the sound, eventually finding the little creature perched on a bookshelf, observing her intently. She gasped, delighted, and gently scooped up the tiny alien, holding it close. Vince chuckled nervously, watching as Foxera's attention shifted entirely to his mischievous pet. She was charmed by the creature's quirks and playfulness, holding it as if it were her own. After some time, Vince, feeling a bit sidelined, gently suggested it was the creature's bedtime. He took the little alien upstairs, placing it in its small makeshift bed, whispering for it to behave. When he returned, he found Foxra waiting, her gaze soft and inviting. Vince moved closer, his usual professional composure giving way to something more vulnerable and warm. He reached for her hand, and as they looked at each other, a shared understanding passed between them. With a slight smile, Vince leaned in, and their lips met in a soft, tender kiss that seemed to last forever. As Vince excused himself to fetch the bottle of massage oil, he couldn't help but feel a bit flustered. Foxra had an otherworldly beauty that was hard to describe, and the warmth radiating between them was both thrilling and calming. He rummaged through the bathroom cabinet for the oil, taking a few steadying breaths as he did so, hoping to compose himself. After what felt like an eternity, he found the small bottle and returned to the dimly lit room where Foxra waited, her gaze following him with an amused curiosity. He uncapped the bottle, and the gentle scent of lavender filled the room as he poured a bit of the oil into his hands, warming it between his palms. He began by applying light pressure to her shoulders, slowly working his way down her arms, feeling her muscles relax under his fingertips. Her skin was incredibly soft, and as he massaged her, he could feel her letting go of any lingering tension from her journey to Earth. Foxra let out a contented sigh, closing her eyes. "I see that massages are yet another earthly art form," she murmured, her voice warm and slightly teasing. Vince smiled, his confidence growing. "We have a few skills here on Earth that I think you'll enjoy," he replied, his tone playful but sincere. Encouraged, he moved his hands to her neck, working his fingers gently into the base of her skull, easing any stiffness there. She tilted her head to give him better access, and as he moved his hands slowly along her shoulders and down her back, he could feel the warmth between them deepening. Her relaxed breaths and occasional sighs filled the quiet room, and for a moment, it felt as though the universe itself had slowed, leaving just the two of them in this quiet, intimate space. After a while, Foxra leaned back slightly, her eyes fluttering open to meet his gaze. "You truly are skilled, Vince," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "On my world, touch is a way of sharing energy. We do not often allow others to touch us, but I trust you." Her words struck him deeply, and for a moment, he felt like he was on the edge of something entirely new, something he didn't fully understand, but wanted to embrace. Without a word, Vince reached out to take her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. As their hands joined, it felt like an electric current passed between them, a silent, unspoken connection that transcended words or logic. The boundaries of their worlds seemed to blur, leaving them suspended in a space where only their shared breath, touch, and presence mattered. Foxra leaned closer, her face inches from his, her eyes searching his, as if she were reading his very soul. Slowly, their lips met again in a gentle, lingering kiss. Vince felt his heartbeat quicken, and he sensed that Foxra's heartbeat matched his rhythm, sensing with his in a way that felt both foreign and beautifully familiar. In that moment, his small alien pet, curious and ever the opportunist, scurried into the room, holding the bottle of massage oil that Vince had forgotten earlier. It chirped softly, and they both broke away from the kiss, laughing softly as the little creature placed the bottle on the nearby table with an almost dignified air, as if saying, "Don't forget this." Foxra's laugh filled the room, warm and vibrant, and Vince couldn't help but chuckle as well. The little alien had an uncanny knack for showing up at just the right time, adding a light-hearted charm to the moment. Vince reached over, patting the creature fondly, feeling grateful for its presence and the joy it brought into his life. "Thank you, little one," he murmured, his eyes twinkling. The creature chirped happily, seemingly pleased with itself, and then scampered off, leaving them alone once again. Foxra, her gaze softening, reached out to place her hand gently on Vince's cheek. "It's moments like this that make me understand why you love this planet and this home of yours so deeply," she whispered. Vince placed his hand over hers, squeezing it gently. "And it's moments like this that make me grateful to have met you," he replied. He guided her back to the comfortable spot where they had begun, resuming the massage, this time allowing his touch to linger, feeling as though he were tracing the boundaries between two worlds with each stroke. As Foxera's hands moved expertly over his shoulders, Vince closed his eyes, surrendering fully to her touch. Her fingers worked with an otherworldly precision, knowing just where to press, where to linger, and how to ease the stress that had built up over years of dedicated work and study. Each stroke seemed to draw him deeper into a serene state, as though he were floating somewhere between waking and sleep, caught in a peaceful reverie. Foxera's hands traveled down his back, kneading gently, then gliding across his arms in long, soothing strokes. The lavender scent mixed with her unique fragrance, a faint metallic sweetness that hinted at the distant world she came from, grounding him in this surreal moment. Her touch was both gentle and deliberate, and he felt himself slipping into a sense of weightlessness, as though she were taking him beyond the walls of his home, beyond the stars, to her world. She leaned closer, her warm breath soft against his skin. "On my world, touch is sacred," she whispered. "It is how we communicate what words cannot, a way to express feelings and thoughts that are too complex for language." Vince felt a shiver run through him at her words, her voice low and melodic, almost as if she were speaking an ancient language, one that bypassed reason and went straight to the soul. He turned his head slightly to look up at her, caught in the warmth of her gaze. "You have a gift, Foxera. I never knew touch could feel like this." Foxera smiled, her fingers brushing his cheek softly. "It is not only my gift," she said quietly. "You, too, have the power to give this feeling to others. All it takes is intention and openness." She tilted her head, studying his face with a mixture of affection and curiosity. "You may not know it, but you've made me feel things I never knew were possible." He reached up, taking her hand, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other, their connection deepening with each shared glance, as if they were learning an entire language through touch and silence. Vince finally broke the silence. I think you've shown me more in one night than I've learned in a lifetime." Foxera smiled, her eyes warm, filled with a deep understanding. Some moments transcend time. They carry an entire universe within them. They sat together in the soft glow of dawn that had begun to filter through the curtains, a quiet peacefulness enveloping them. Vince felt as though they were suspended in time, that the morning sun would never fully rise and this dreamlike state would stretch on forever. And yet, in the stillness, he could feel the bittersweet truth settling in his heart. Their time together was finite. She had a world she needed to return to, and he had his duties here on Earth. Foxera shifted closer, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face, her eyes soft yet filled with a resolve that mirrored his own. "There will always be a part of me with you, Vince," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He held her hand tightly, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. "And there will always be a part of me waiting for you. For as long as it takes." He paused, drawing in a steadying breath. "But I'll never stop hoping you'll come back, even if it's just for another night like this." They shared one last, tender kiss, letting the weight of their unspoken promises carry through. Foxera rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat together in silence, letting the rising sun wash over them, warming their skin as they held on to each other for as long as time would allow.